Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. One of the greatest attributes of Lady Fatima al-Zahra is her chastity and her modesty, what we call it in Arabic as haya. We see this important characteristic in the lifetime of Lady Fatima al-Zahra. In order to better understand it, an introduction must be made before. There are lots of ahadith putting this notion that having true faith is dependent on having modesty and chastity in the heart, no matter for man or woman. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, the reality of haya and modesty is to at-tathabbut inda kulla munkarin yunkiruhu at-tawheed wal-ma'rifah. So true chastity and modesty is to abandon oneself from whatever may be against Tawheed and unity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and having knowledge of Allah. So it is quite different from what we have it as being embarrassed, as being shy, or being kind of introvert in the character. A person might be very brave to express ideas, to not to be shy, to be very relaxed when expressing ideas and talking what he or she has in his mind or her mind, but at the same time to be modest. So reality of modesty is with having dignity inside. First, it begins with dignity of man. When man considers himself or herself with dignity and the value not to lose and not to give up for things which are not, does not suit the personality of human being. So with the dignity in the heart comes modesty, and it is so related to faith. Any person who has faith must be modest and must have this great virtue of poise and modesty. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam says there are different levels of modesty, of haya. And the first level is, Imam says, haya or dhanbin. So to be embarrassed to commit sins. So this is the first level and the first step of having modesty and being modest. So you see Allah present everywhere, and you never commit sins. You never go against the wish of Allah. You are embarrassed before Allah to commit any sin. Then it comes the second level, which is haya or taqsirin, or modesty of failure. To be embarrassed when you fail to do your duty towards Allah the way that it deserves. Imagine when a guest comes to your home and you don't have enough facilities, food or fruit or anything to serve the guest in a way that you feel they deserve to be treated. So you feel sort of embarrassed. This feeling is this sort of modesty and embarrassment that you have is not because of a sin that you have committed, but you feel that you failed to treat them the way they deserve. And then it comes haya or karamatan, or modesty out of dignity. It increases to a level that then it's not the matter of committing sins or having failure. It's the matter that you feel modesty and you feel embarrassed before Allah because of the dignity that you have in your heart. And then it comes the greatest levels of modesty, which to see the love of Allah and to be modest because of the love that you have towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bearing these realities in mind, we find all these aspects and characteristics in the life of Lady Fatima al-Zahra salamullahi alayha. talking about the modesty and chastity of Lady Fatima al-Zahra Salamullah alayha, we see those different levels of modesty in the life of Lady Fatima al-Zahra being manifested by her. She is beyond committing sins, so she never committed any sin to talk about her modesty in this aspect. Certainly, this was the very first level of modesty that Lady had, and they never committed any sin. But we see greatest and greater levels of modesty in Lady's life, like for example, to be haya or taqsir, to be embarrassed because you have not done the way that Allah deserves. She was a great worshipper, worshipping at nights. When she was asked why you are worshipping this line, to say that I have not done my worship the way that Allah deserves, then this is the modesty before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of failing to worship Allah the way that Allah deserves. Because even the Prophet or Lady Fatima, who are the greatest people, Imam Ali alayhi salam, the way that they worship is the worship of human being, and human being cannot worship God. It is impossible for limited being to worship non-limited one the way that Allah deserves. So no matter how much do you worship God, how much you do worshiping, but at the end you feel when a person who is of a great knowledge of Allah feels more in debt to Allah. A person who is not that much knowledgeable, like ordinary people, we may worship God for a while, then we feel arrogant, feeling that we are very good people and we are much better than others. But true believers, because of the great knowledge that they have, because they have knowledge of greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they find their worships nothing before those millions of billions of mercies and greatness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has and has given us. So you always, much more you worship, more you feel in debt towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we see that even when she comes to worship, she has this kind of modesty in the worship. When she asks Allah in her supplications, she's embarrassed to ask for herself before asking for neighbors. And when her son asks why you kept worshiping for the neighbors and you didn't worship for ourselves, Lady says, first neighbors, then ourselves. So this is haya or karama. This is out of her dignity, because of the dignity that Lady has, that she doesn't see this for herself, to ask for herself and her family first. First the neighbors, first others, then ourselves. Or for example, the narration that once the Prophet was at the house of Lady Fatima al-Zahra, when a person came, a man came, a stranger, and he was to ask Prophet of Allah for something. So he entered the house of Lady Fatima, and Lady Fatima was inside. When she was coming to the Prophet, when she found out that the man is there with the Prophet, she went back to have her hijab, the necessary hijab, before a non-mahram person. Seeing this, the Prophet told to Lady Fatima al-Zahra Salamullah alayha that this person is blind. He cannot see. Lady Fatima al-Zahra said, he cannot see, but I can see. What does it mean? It means that my dignity doesn't let me to come to a man without having proper hijab. And the true concept of hijab is this. The true concept of hijab, or wearing this clothing, all these are because of keeping dignity of women, modesty of women. So Lady Fatima al-Zahra, as the best example of modesty, she cannot accept not having hijab before a person who cannot see her. And this is not because of that person, it is because of the great modesty and dignity that Lady has in her heart, that doesn't let her to do what she finds it against her own dignity. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us and give us the chance and tawfiq to follow these great role models in our lives.